Why was Muammar Gaddafi so obsessed with keeping the most beautiful but virgin elite bodyguards? Why could he not trust male bodyguards with his life and had to rely instead on stunning young women, handpicked for their beauty and purity? What was the logic behind choosing only virgins? Was there any twisted reason for this demand? Was it a military tactic or something far darker? For years, the world saw them in tailored uniforms, heels, red lipstick, and sunglasses, known as Gaddafi's infamous Amazonian Guard, a squad of striking young women trained to kill for their leader. They were glamorous, mysterious, and deadly. They followed him everywhere, standing silently behind him like shadows, sparking global curiosity. But behind the perfectly posed photographs and choreographed public appearances, a much more disturbing truth was hiding, one that the regime desperately tried to keep buried. What was it, and how were the elite virgin bodyguards used? In this video, let's find out. When the world first saw a ring of heavily armed women in tight uniforms, high heels, and carefully applied makeup, forming a human wall around Muammar Gaddafi, the reaction ranged from disbelief to fascination. But beneath the theatrics lay a decision rooted not in pageantry, but in psychology, strategy, and obsession. Gaddafi's insistence on female bodyguards wasn't merely symbolic. The Middle East, particularly in conservative Arab and Islamic cultures, has deeply ingrained taboos around harming women, especially in public or in combat. Gaddafi believed that enemies, especially Arab male assassins or rival military actors, would hesitate, even freeze, before attacking if it meant shooting a woman. He turned that hesitation into a tactical advantage. But strategy was only part of it. The deeper, darker obsession lay in his compulsion for control, not just over Libya, but over the very bodies and lives of those who guarded him. He didn't just want women, he wanted virgins, untouched, unclaimed, and emotionally unencumbered. He wanted them pure, adaptable, and completely loyal. He once said that a woman who had never been with a man could be fully committed to the revolution, free from distraction, passion, or divided loyalties. And so, the revolutionary nuns were born, an elite corps of women trained not just in weapons, but in ideological devotion. Before formal training, they were required to take a sacred oath of virginity and loyalty, pledging their bodies and their lives to Gaddafi. These weren't just guards, they were sworn disciples. In many ways, they mirrored religious vestals more than soldiers. The regime even promoted the idea that their virginity gave them a mystical moral authority. Behind these layers of different explanations, there was paranoia. Gaddafi had long feared betrayal from within, particularly from male officers. In the early years of his rule, he had already survived multiple coup attempts. He became convinced that men, even those raised in the ideology of the regime, were dangerous, driven by ambition or tribal allegiances. But women, especially virgins with no prior ties, trained from scratch and isolated from ordinary society, to him, they were safer, more controllable, and less likely to conspire. Still, his obsession took an even darker turn. Gaddafi reportedly handpicked many of the women personally. Selection was not only based on physical ability or political loyalty, but also on youth, beauty, and charm. Only the most physically attractive, often aged 18 to 22, were shortlisted, adding a disturbing layer of sexualized militarism to the regime's narrative. This bizarre mix of sexual purity, ideological loyalty, and martial readiness turned the Amazonian Guard into a hybrid, part warrior caste, part symbolic harem. Every time Gaddafi appeared flanked by these women, he wasn't just showing strength. He was displaying domination over both gender roles and the conventions of power in the Arab world. Where other dictators relied on tanks, he relied on a human theater of discipline, desire, and obedience. But it was never a joke to them. These women lived in isolation. Forbidden from marriage, romance, or family life, they existed only for one purpose: to protect a man who saw them as both shields and trophies. One must remember that these women were not free to leave. Their virginity wasn't just a condition, it was a lifelong contract, signed in ideology and sealed in fear. And everything had its roots in the Green Book. Penned in 1975, it was his ideological manifesto, a stitched-together hybrid of socialism, tribalism, and radical pan-Arabism. It also contained what some naive Western observers mistook for early feminism. The Green Book proclaimed that women and men are equal, but different. Gaddafi argued that women had long been oppressed not by Islam, but by Western materialism and capitalism. In his view, forcing women into labor to achieve equality was itself an oppression. He claimed that true liberation was about enabling women to fulfill their natural roles without being corrupted by economic systems that commodified them. At first glance, this sounded progressive. Under Gaddafi, female literacy skyrocketed. In 1969, before his rise, only 15% of girls went to school. By the 1990s, that number had tripled. Women entered universities in droves, and by the 2000s, over half of Libya's college students were women. They became doctors, engineers, and even pilots. A woman served as head of Libya's telecommunications authority. Girls from rural tribes received scholarships. Further, he created a women's military academy, not just to train female soldiers, but to institutionalize this gender vision. Strong enough to carry rifles, soft enough to wear makeup. At the academy, students were taught not just weapons handling, but the Green Book itself, drilled daily in Gaddafi's philosophy. Women were reminded that they were different from men, and their strength lay in maintaining that difference while still serving the revolution. In a 1980 speech, Muammar Gaddafi declared, "There must be a world revolution to eliminate the conditions that push women to do man's duties." To many outside Libya, this sounded like a contradiction, but for Gaddafi, it was part of a broader philosophical project, not about mimicking Western feminism, but about building a distinctly African-Arab model of society, where women's liberation was redefined in terms of national identity, not Western ideals. Virginity and beauty, often misunderstood in foreign commentary, were not signs of oppression in this framework, but symbols of purity, loyalty, and incorruptibility. These were traits Gaddafi valued deeply, not just in women, but in all symbols of the state. His emphasis on virgin female bodyguards was not a fetish, but a strategic alignment, with his belief that those unbound by personal or tribal obligations would be more committed to the revolution. By the early 1980s, Muammar Gaddafi's ideas had fully taken shape. One of the most visible and unique expressions of that system was the creation of the Amazonian Guard, an elite, all-female military unit that stunned the world and redefined what power looked like in Libya. These women were not randomly recruited. Gaddafi insisted on specific criteria that aligned with his national vision. Candidates had to be young, unmarried, and ideologically committed. Virginity, to Gaddafi, symbolized neutrality, loyalty, and purity, a blank slate upon which the revolutionary ethos could be written. Their selection was rigorous: background checks, medical screenings, physical assessments, and political tests. Only a select few graduated into the elite ranks of the Amazonian Guard, also known as the Revolutionary Nuns. These women were sworn to protect Gaddafi with their lives. They took vows of chastity, loyalty, and obedience, and were regarded as more than just guards. They were symbols of the Libyan revolution. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. For those selected into the Amazonian Guard, life became both prestigious and demanding. Their training continued even after selection. Each day began before dawn with intense physical drills, weapons inspections, and strategy briefings. They remained in constant readiness, not just for ceremonial duties, but for real threats. Whether at Gaddafi's side during domestic appearances or accompanying him on foreign state visits, They were the first line of defense in an era where assassination attempts and foreign plots were not abstract fears, but real possibilities. Typically, 15 female bodyguards formed a human shield around Gaddafi whenever he stepped into public. This was no symbolic circle. They were armed, drilled, and trained to react within seconds. Foreign dignitaries often watched in awe as these women flanked the Libyan leader with military precision, dressed in stylized uniforms that fused state authority with visual elegance. Their role extended far beyond security. The revolutionary nuns, as they were also known, often handled responsibilities within Gaddafi's inner residences. Some maintained his quarters, coordinated logistics for his travel, or assisted with private engagements. These duties, while often portrayed as servile by foreign commentators, were in fact extensions of their trust and status within the system. To be entrusted with both the leader's life and his private space was seen as an honor, a level of access few others attained. Within the academy, girls who didn't make it into the Guard still found careers in the police, civil service, and military administration. The skills they acquired, from firearms handling to ideological literacy, opened doors that had been closed to women for generations. Of course, the structure was strict. Romantic involvement was discouraged, not as a moral judgment, but as a way to ensure full focus on national service. Tribal allegiances and family ties were minimized because loyalty to the revolutionary state was paramount. For a country emerging from colonialism, tribalism, and monarchy, this was seen as a necessary step toward building unity and discipline. They lived in state-run dormitories, often under close supervision. But this was not exceptional in Libya. A similar oversight applied to male officers and government officials. The goal was not to suppress freedom, but to maintain cohesion within a system that emphasized collective purpose over individual indulgence. These elite female bodyguards were not victims. They were not puppets. They were, in Gaddafi's Libya, the chosen protectors of a new order, and they wore that title with a mix of discipline, pride, and purpose. But were they really effective? The incidents in 1998 in the city of Derna, a coastal town in eastern Libya, showed that. During a sudden ambush on Gaddafi's convoy, the details of which remain closely guarded to this day, a young guard named Aisha made the ultimate sacrifice. When gunfire broke out, Aisha reportedly threw herself between the bullets and the leader, absorbing the fatal shots and dying instantly. In that moment, she fulfilled her oath, not just of loyalty, but of self-erasure for a larger cause. This wasn't an isolated case. Former insiders and military sources have described multiple incidents over the decades where female guards reacted with extraordinary speed and bravery. Some drew their weapons in seconds, intercepting attackers before male security could respond. Others stood their ground in the face of threats, creating a buffer zone of living shields during tense public appearances. However, reports of the dark side behind having these virgin women bodyguards began to surface, albeit unconfirmed. In 2001, long before the regime fell, Libyan psychologist Dr. Seyham Sergewa began investigating a hidden side of the Amazonian Guard. At the time, her work was considered controversial, even dangerous, in a tightly controlled society where criticism of the state was nearly impossible. Yet she managed to speak to 8 former guards, each with a story that disrupted the public narrative. According to their accounts, not all the women in the Guard were willing participants. Some had joined voluntarily, drawn by the promise of national service, opportunity, or the chance to rise in a society where doors were often closed to women. But others claimed they had been pressured, coerced, or even blackmailed into joining, selected through tribal or family connections that had more to do with political loyalty than personal ambition. What they revealed was not a uniform experience. Some described years of proud service. Others described a hidden world behind the parade, where obedience meant more than following orders. While official doctrine emphasized chastity, purity, and discipline, some former guards alleged that sexual exploitation occurred not only by Gaddafi himself, but by powerful figures in his inner circle. These were not accusations of public scandal. They were quiet, reluctant recollections, shared in closed rooms, away from cameras and journalists. Further, there were claims of isolation. Once inside the elite unit, women often lost contact with their families. Phone calls were monitored, movements were restricted. They lived in state-controlled dormitories, supervised by security personnel who ensured that their behavior aligned with the image the regime projected. There were reports that romantic relationships were forbidden and that punishment for emotional disobedience could include dismissal, public shaming, or transfer to less visible roles. For women raised in tribal or conservative communities, the loss of reputation could be permanent. Returning home, even years later, often meant facing ostracism. And yet, even these darker testimonies did not fully unravel the complexity of the Amazonian Guard. Some guards refused to speak out, not because they were silenced, but because they still believed in what they had been part of. They saw themselves not as victims, but as soldiers. Their loyalty to the idea of the Libyan revolution and to Gaddafi as its father figure remained intact even after the regime's collapse. The Libyan state, for its part, never acknowledged these claims. No formal investigations were launched. No apologies were issued. After 2011, Libya descended into chaos. The Amazonian Guard, once a global symbol, disappeared from the conversation, replaced by images of militias, tribal conflict, and foreign intervention. In this environment, the women's voices were lost, caught between the memory of their service and the suspicion of their nation. Some were labeled collaborators, others simply vanished. And that's perhaps the greatest tragedy, because whatever one believes about the Amazonian Guard, whether they were empowered or used, liberated or manipulated, the truth is that their story remains unfinished. The archives are locked, the testimonies fragmented, and in the absence of a functioning state, no one is keeping their record. What do you think about Gaddafi's beautiful, virgin, and elite female bodyguards? What message did he want to convey through them? In the comment section below, share your thoughts on Muammar Gaddafi's era and how he made Libya prosper compared to how Libya is today. And tell us what he would have done if he was alive today. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.